General Hospital spoilers for Friday, August 8th, state that Drew Kane will concentrate on his next Willow Tate tactic while Britt Westbourne goes on strike. Jason Morgan will also receive some concerning Scout Kane news, so let's discuss what's in store. First, Anna Devane will bring up some unfinished business as she confronts Carly Spencer and Jack Brennan. Of course, Anna could face treason charges if she spills any sensitive WSB information, so she won't say too much. Instead, Anna may make up an explanation for wanting to talk to Carly about Jocelyn Jacks again, leaving Brennan satisfied for the time being. Carly will have an idea for Brennan to consider. Carly will submit a concept and seek Brennan's feedback, so keep tuned to see if he is enthused about her plan. Lulu Spencer and Dante Falconeri will then discuss why Laura Collins summoned them to her office. Dante and Lulu will ultimately receive updates on something that makes them angry. Therefore, this could be related to Liesl Albrecht's attempt to get closer to Rocco Falconeri. Curtis Ashford appears to be willing to concede to Jordan Ashford that he is giving his marriage to Portia Robinson another shot. Curtis will say that it would not have happened without Jordan, therefore he may credit her with salvaging his current relationship. Meanwhile, Drew will hunt down Elizabeth Baldwin at the hospital and question if she truly believes Willow is better off now. Drew is determined to assist Willow in regaining custody of her children, so he may ask Liz to speak with her on his behalf. Drew can admit that he would desire a romantic reunion as well, and question if Elizabeth will support him. Across town, Alexis Davis will inform Jason about her most recent talk with Drew, who intends to take Scout to look at schools for when they relocate to Washington, D.C. Alexis will be completely opposed to this decision, and she will express her concerns to Jason. Jason will be invested in Scout's future as well, because Danny Morgan is her older brother, and will miss her greatly. Isn't this meant to be about Scout's needs? Alexis asks in the Friday GH teaser video. Jason will undoubtedly agree, but he may wonder what Alexis expects him to do since Drew has all the cards when it comes to his daughter. Anna will eventually meet with Jason, and she may tell him about the Dalmatia clue she received from Brennan. Because Jason knows Britt's suitcase originated from a Dalmatian resort, Anna may suspect a connection between Britt and a new WSB mission. Even if Anna doesn't go into depth, she may be able to pique Jason's interest and persuade him to visit the Five Poppies resort. Britt, on the other hand, appears to be content to sunbathe poolside and resist any further orders until she is given greater freedom. You can tell him I'm on strike, Britt argues in Friday's GH teaser video. According to General Hospital spoilers, Britt will play hardball with the big boss, so expect drama. General Hospital spoilers are available for Friday, August 8, 2025. Fans might expect Britt Westbourne to get defiant. Jason Morgan and Alexis Davis get in touch. Plus, Anna Devane makes a daring move in front of Jack Brennan and Carly Spencer. Continue reading and let's discuss what's coming up on the ABC soap drama. Britt Westbourne's defiance. Let's start with Britt, who is now in Croatia at the Five Poppies resort. The brunette appears to be working on the case involving Professor Henry Hank Dalton. However, Britt appears to have a decent relationship with the primary boss. Unfortunately, it appears that the resort's manager is keeping Britt locked up. The man will not even let Britt drive her car or go out to eat. Britt will go on strike until she gets what she wants. This is what the woman says in a preview clip. Drew Kane's harassment. While at the hospital, Drew Kane will run into Elizabeth Liz Baldwin. Of course, the congressman will pester Liz for an update on Willow Tate. Meanwhile, Lulu Spencer and Dante Falconeri are outraged. Read more. Find out what happened on the most recent episode of General Hospital. Could this be related to Rocco Falconeri and Liesl Albrecht? Even though Liesl was cautioned not to exacerbate the tensions between Rocco and his parents, she may believe that the teenager is her sole remaining link to Britt. There's also a preview clip for Friday, August 8, 2025. It has a scene between Dante and Lulu in Laura Collins' office. However, nobody appears to be present. Lulu discusses the mystery behind why she wanted to see them. Carly will present Brennan an idea tomorrow, Friday, August 8, 2025, according to General Hospital spoilers. However, it appears they have been ambushed. A preview clip shows Anna stating that they have unfinished business. Anna will also provide feedback to Jason Morgan. Jason will also receive a visit from Alexis Davis. Curtis Ashford catches up with Jordan Ashford again. Curtis tells his ex-wife, "It wouldn't have happened without you." Despite Curtis' renewed dedication to Portia Robinson, it appears that these two could become closer. Which narrative are you most looking forward to witnessing on Friday, August 8, 2025? Share your opinions in the comments area below. Keep watching ABC soap operas to find out what happens next. Drew had always been calculated, but the plan he devised for Willow exposed how far he was ready to manipulate those closest to him in the name of control. With the silent, steely cold precision he had formerly used on battlefields and in boardrooms, he now focused on a more personal war, one based on Willow's allegiance, Jason's silence, and Britt's disobedience. And in his mind, every step was important. Willow had been quietly struggling, emotionally fatigued by months of uncertainty, betrayal, and conflicted loyalties. Her faith in Michael began to crumble when she discovered he wasn't being completely honest about what was going on behind the scenes with Drew. Michael was keeping secrets from her, particularly about the offer Jason had refused and Drew's attempts to emotionally corner them both. Willow couldn't afford to come apart now. Her children needed her, and every decision she made felt like it would reverberate throughout their lives. Drew noticed the cracks growing. He noticed Willow's hands trembling when she thought no one was looking. He listened carefully as she offered soft but penetrating questions. Where had Jason truly been that night? Why had Britt left GH without saying a word? Was Drew certain that none of this had anything to do with something more dangerous? Drew saw Willow's vulnerability as an opportunity. He knew how to prey on guilt and manipulate terror into compliance. His strategy was neither loud nor forceful. It was gentle and deceptive, wearing the guise of compassion and commitment. He began to turn up more frequently, checking in, giving assistance with the children, and even volunteering at the hospital when he knew she would be there. He asked her questions regarding Michael's mental state, as if concerned. He hinted that Michael might be losing himself under the weight of the family drama. Willow wasn't naive. She noticed something strange about Drew's actions. His compassion seemed false and too contrived. And behind his pleasant grin, she detected a sharpness that had not previously existed. Drew remained cautious, refusing to overplay his hand for the time being. He needed her to trust him first. Then he may cause her to mistrust Michael, bringing her closer to selecting him in times of difficulty. He was not interested in a romantic relationship with Willow. His interests were strategic. He would have an advantage over Michael if he could control her voice, behavior, and access to the children. Finally, against Jason. Britt had finally reached her limit, as Drew plotted his subtle power play. She was tired of being dragged into the maelstrom of other people's faults, lied to, manipulated, and asked to clean up the mess. She did not bother with a formal statement or a theatrical exit. One afternoon, she just left her hospital badge at the nurse's station, collected her belongings, and walked away. She was not leaving town yet. She still had reasons to stay, loose ends to tie, and questions to answer. The most important of these was Jason's true plan. He hadn't been honest with her about the arrangement with Drew, or what he'd witnessed when following down Scout's cryptic texts. She could see the sorrow in his eyes, and his hands trembled slightly as he talked about Scout and the encrypted data. Something was very wrong. The strike wasn't limited to the hospital. It was directed against those who had taken her for granted for far too long. She didn't want to be a part of any system, medical or emotional, that asked her to bear its load while keeping her in the dark. Britt wanted to reclaim control of her life, and she was willing to burn bridges to do so. Jason had always trusted his intuition. That night he finally broke his silence and informed Britt what he had uncovered, not because he had reconciled with Drew, but because he couldn't risk being the only one who knew anymore. Scout had sent a message that did not immediately make sense. A weird symbol, a string of digits, and a GPS ping directed him to an abandoned site outside of town. When Jason arrived, what he found shocked him. It was not a human. It was a room, frigid, deserted, and full with monitors that had been wiped clean only hours before. But one item had been purposefully left behind, as if waiting for him. A photograph. Scout is holding a placard with today's date and the phrase "Don't trust them," written in a child's handwriting. The vision caused his blood to run cold. He knew Scout couldn't do this on her own, therefore someone was assisting her. Someone attempting to warn him, to contact him through his daughter. And whoever it was, they had access to her whereas Jason did not. This implied she was not safe. Not with Drew. Not with anyone. Britt's face paled when he showed her the photograph. She had seen that chamber previously, in a file she wasn't authorized to have access to. Drew had previously been involved in a covert medical operation before returning to Port Charles. It wasn't simply a facility, it was a conditioning center. They tried psychological control techniques, memory suppression, and even deep behavioral conditioning on unwilling participants. And now that facility is linked to Scout. Jason didn't say anything for several minutes. When he finally spoke, his tone was rough. I need to get her back. Whatever it takes. Britt nodded, her rage returning, not at Jason but at Drew. She suspected he'd kept this hidden for a reason. Perhaps he didn't believe Jason would ever find the photograph. Maybe he didn't mind what they did to Scout. Jason went to Michael. He put everything out. Britt's strike, Scout's message, the fitness center, and Drew's weird quiet. Michael's response was conflicting. He wanted to think Drew was still doing what was best for the family. But given the evidence, he couldn't deny that something had changed. Drew had become colder and more inclined to manipulate rather than protect. Michael didn't know who he could trust anymore. At the same time, Drew's acts became more daring. He began taking advantage of Willow's anxiety for Scout. He portrayed Jason's investigation as hazardous and unbalanced, stating Jason was driven by grief and couldn't see clearly. He assured Willow that Scout was secure, and that these were merely planted distractions intended to disrupt Jason. Willow listened, but uncertainty grew. If Scout had indeed delivered that message, she could not ignore it. And why would Britt leave without warning, unless something awful had occurred? Britt had always been reclusive, occasionally caustic, but she didn't hit unless forced. Willow's anxiety was exacerbated by her continued quiet after leaving the hospital. Even Elizabeth tried to reach her but received no response. Something was wrong, and they were all circling it, refusing to face the truth. Meanwhile, Jason was getting ready for a confrontation. He realized he was running out of time. Scout's warning indicated that they were observing and tracking him. Each step has to be computed. He began shifting his resources, establishing secondary safe houses and requesting favors from those who owed him loyalty, not Drew. Willow, still torn between Michael's quiet concern and Drew's smothering protectiveness, eventually sought out to Jason. She asked him a simple question. Is Scout okay? Jason did not lie. He told her the truth. He showed her the photograph. He told her what Britt had seen and recognized. Willow's heart broke. She had faith in Drew's capacity to protect them, and that he had good intentions. What about now? Now she noticed the mask slipping. Now she knew why Jason had been so distant and secretive. He had tried to keep everyone safe without exposing how deadly things had gotten. She broke down in Jason's arms. It wasn't only about Scout. It was about everything. The lies, the manipulation, and the terror that none of them had ever actually been safe, even for a single day. Jason held her silently, allowing her to cry. He didn't make promises he couldn't fulfill. But he made one promise. I will bring her back. Drew, on the other hand, had noticed a change in Willow's temperament. She was not as warm or trusting. He tried to cover it up with more charm and assurances, but she wasn't buying it. She asked direct questions immediately. When he deflected, she responded with steady eyes. Drew's desperation drove him to use a darker technique. He began discussing custody, adding in passing that perhaps it was time to put some legal safeguards in place in case Michael spiraled further or Jason attempted to remove Scout without cause. Willow heard the veiled threat loud and clear. Drew was not shielding anyone. He was attempting to own them. Michael confronted him in the Quartermain living room. Michael demanded to know what Drew was doing, and the conversation quickly turned into a shouting match. Drew did not back down. He explained to Michael that his loyalty to Jason was clouding his judgment. That Scout was better off away from the realm of danger and uncertainty. However, for the first time, Michael saw Drew as a threat rather than a family member. You don't get to decide who's family and who's not, he stated coldly. You do not own Scout. And you definitely don't own Willow. That night, Jason made his move. Britt accompanied him not because she wanted to, but because she needed to know what they had done at that institution. As they returned to the area, this time at night, Britt observed something new: motion sensors and heat signatures, indicating that the facility was not as abandoned as they had been led to believe. What they discovered within would change everything. Scout was not present, but somebody had left a new note. A recorded video with a distorted voice and a hidden face. "You are getting close. But she isn't where you think. And Drew knows more than he's told you." Jason froze. Britt's breath caught. It was confirmation and a warning. Willow returned to Port Charles and finally packed her bags. She took the children and fled the Quartermain estate. She didn't visit Jason's. She did not go to Michael's. She headed to her old flat, which she hadn't visited in months. She needed space. She sought clarity. Drew discovered the vacant room an hour later. And for the first time in weeks, he appeared uncertain. He had made too many moves too quickly. And now the pieces were working against him. Willow was gone. Jason was circling. Britt declared war. Michael had chosen a side. But Drew wasn't finished yet. Alexis could barely contain her rage. Every breath she took seemed forced through tightened teeth, and her eyes narrowed as she paced the room in quick, furious steps. She had spent the most of her life battling fights, including judicial dramas, family problems, and her own inner demons, but this was different. This time, it felt as if the fundamental foundation of her trust had crumbled. Someone had gone behind her back, someone she thought she could trust, and now everything she'd worked so hard to defend was slipping away. Her voice trembled when she finally spoke, low but keen as a blade. She had not anticipated Britt to resist her. Britt, of all people, should have understood the gravity of the situation. She had been given explicit instructions, orders really, and rather than following them, she had gone off on her own, reckless and daring. Alexis had believed that her faith in Britt would pay off, but she now saw that it had been misplaced. Britt's actions were more than arrogant. They were defiant, with an obvious contempt for Alexis' sensitive approach based on their vulnerable circumstances. Britt, for her part, refused to back down. Her face was tight with frustration, but her eyes remained firm. She had her reasons, which made sense to her even though they didn't to Alexis. She was not going to sit idle while further damage was being done, especially when she had the opportunity to act. It wasn't just about proving herself, though that undoubtedly helped, but also about doing what she thought was right. Britt was not a soldier in another's war. She was a fighter in her own right. When she witnessed something unjust or incorrect, she reacted. She acted. And now she was coping with the consequences. Drew, on the other hand, kept a cool head as he watched the firestorm unfold. The tension between Alexis and Britt was beneficial to him. It was just the distraction he needed to put his own plan into action. He wasn't particularly proud of the way he had been acting lately, at least not entirely, but he was persuaded it was necessary. Drew had tried to play it clean to make peace, but peace did not earn power, and he was beginning to realize that if he didn't seize control soon, he'd be the next one left in the dust. He had carefully sown seeds in the last 2 weeks, taking advantage of the volatility around him to gain quiet allegiances and harvest knowledge that others thought he couldn't locate. Drew was always underestimated, especially now that Jason was back in the scene and taking the attention. Drew had learned to be delicate and listen, whereas Jason was stoic and silent. And everything he'd been hearing lately indicated that the entire balance of power in Port Charles was going to tip, one way or another. He simply needed to be on the correct side when it happened. Carly, as always, was attempting to keep everything afloat, but this time was different. She wasn't used to being taken off guard, but Drew's recent actions had her concerned. He was becoming more secretive and driven, and not in the usual, trustworthy way she had grown to expect. There was something deeper in him now, something he wouldn't speak. She had assumed they were still on the same page, but now she was beginning to wonder whether she had been left behind in the whirlwind of his ambitions. When she approached him, she expected the usual calm explanations, possibly a faint apology or justification. Instead, she noticed a flash of something else in his eyes, something that reminded her of Sonny at his most threatening. Drew hadn't broken any lines yet, but she could see he was near. He was walking a fine line between moral clarity and merciless action, and Carly couldn't determine whether she was more scared of losing him to it, or of what he might do if she tried to intervene. Everything was unraveling in small, quiet chunks. Alexis was in a righteous wrath, destroying bridges. Britt was holding firm even if it meant being alone. Drew drew lines in secret. Carly was watching the man she thought she knew transform into someone she was unsure she could trust. The chaos wasn't loud yet, but it was growing. An undertow pushing them all into deeper water. Alexis, ever the fighter, was not about to let Britt's betrayal stand. She began exploring, attempting to comprehend the entire scope of what Britt had done. It wasn't just an issue of pride. It was about minimizing the damage. If Britt had revealed something they couldn't hide, they'd all be susceptible. Alexis had spent too many years surviving calamities to let one rash move ruin everything. But she didn't realize Britt wasn't working alone. She had someone else guiding her in the background, someone with their own goal. While Alexis focused on damage management, Britt was preparing for any potential backlash. She wasn't scared to fight, and she'd learned long ago not to rely too heavily on others to protect her. She was used to being underestimated, but this time, she had an advantage that Alexis didn't realize. She held powerful, even volatile information that, if used, could change the entire game. Drew was already a few steps ahead. He had planned the following several days with the precision of a strategist, and every action he made now was a piece in a larger jigsaw. He wasn't just reacting to the mayhem around him, he was causing it. With every distraction and disagreement, he gained more room to maneuver. He was no longer looking for acceptance from Carly, Jason, or Alexis. He was beyond all that. The only thing he was concerned about now was the endgame. Carly felt the shift. Even if she didn't have all of the information, something was shifting in Drew, and it was drawing him away from her. She tried to confront him again, to calm him down, to remind him of who he once was. However, her remarks did not appear to land as well as they once had. He listened, nodded, and then resumed his intended activities. He seemed to have accepted who he was becoming, which worried Carly more than anything else. The days ahead promised more clashes and revelations. Britt would have to choose between protecting herself and destroying everything to show her point. Alexis would need to choose between justice and loyalty. Drew would have to confront the consequences of his ambition. Carly would be left to pick up the pieces, or watch as they fell. Nobody saw what happened next. They were too preoccupied with protecting their secrets, holding grudges, and chasing the versions of themselves they believed they still were. But the storm was inevitable, and no one would emerge unscathed.